Hello everybody, here we are today continuing on with our NHL season previews, and in this one we're going to be covering the Pittsburgh Penguins, talking about if they can get back into the postseason. So before we get started with it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So last season the Penguins finished with 88 points and missed the playoffs for a second straight year, and it was a tough break because this is an organization that has continued to preach the same message, that they feel good enough to make the playoffs. That is their goal, that is their expectations. But last year they actually ended up regressing by 3 points, not a whole lot, but still they aren't anywhere close to the playoffs, at least from what we saw last year. And the question is with this team, with the additions they made that might not live up to the message that they're trying to convey, is how do they plan on getting back into the postseason, and then what should their aspirations be? So with Pittsburgh, I think there's a lot of fun things to talk about, again, with some of the names that they have on the roster. So now we get to talk about what are some storylines for this year. So the first storyline is how good can Michael Bunting be? Now, Bunting is a guy that saw success with the Toronto Maple Leafs before things kind of went weird, where his minutes would go up and down and just based off performance, of course. But he ends up getting shipped off to Carolina. For the Hurricanes, he plays a little over 60 games before getting traded over to Pittsburgh, and part of the Jake Gensel trade is Carolina tries to bolster their Stanley Cup aspirations. That doesn't work out, and then he ends up going to Tampa Bay. Of course, they trade him there and he signs an extension, which is a little bit funny. But anyway, back to Bunting. He actually saw pretty good success when he got shipped over to Pittsburgh, as he had 19 points in 21 games with the Pens. And one thing that I liked about this is 14 out of those 19 points were at 5-on-5 play. And I just feel like there is a real chance for Bunting to have a career year, as he is somebody that has got a lot of power play time with the Penguins once he got shipped off over there, and is going to get a lot of time with guys like Sidney Crosby and Brian Rust. Sidney Crosby, of course, was able to go on a monster tear, trying to single-handedly try to get the Pens to the playoffs last year. Had 94 points on the season, I think, at the ripe age of 36 years old. So if you're getting to play with him and you're getting to play with Brian Rust, a guy that can be a goal scorer, I think last year he missed a good chunk of time, then you could see the potential for Bunting to, again, thrive on something like the power play and help Pittsburgh's power play improve. And then circling back to 5-on-5 play, especially, he got time with Evgeny Malkin. Malkin, we know, of course, is maybe not the player that he used to be to the same caliber, but is still a name that you're familiar with and think, okay, maybe this could be a good second line or part of a second line. And I do feel overall better about where Bunting could be, because I think he's going to be getting more minutes in favorable situations, and is a guy that could be part of the short-term solution, as I believe he's under contract for this season and next season. He's not over 30, I should say, at the time of doing this, and I don't think he'll be 30 until after both seasons are done and dusted with. So looking at what we're seeing here, a guy that's going to be getting a lot of good things going his way and a spot for a team that is trying to be competitive, I think this could be a mutually beneficial thing here. So I think Michael Bunting is going to be one of those guys that if you do hockey fantasy, NHL fantasy, all that good stuff, maybe you could kind of like look at what's going to happen there. I'm not really too big into it, so I don't know. But from what we saw in a small sample size, things look really good. And I'm hoping that Bunting can, again, hopefully be a spark for this team. Is he going to be the star? Should he be the best player for a team? No way, no how. But what I should say with this is that he should be a nice complementary piece. Second storyline is, can the power play improve? Pittsburgh had the third worst power play percentage in the league last season, and it was a big drop off. As the 2022-23 season, they were able to click at a little over 34%, and this prior season that we saw here was just over 15%. So it wasn't even half as effective as it was compared to the 2022-23 season, and that is a big blow. And I know a lot of people are probably contributing this as to why Pittsburgh wasn't necessarily good, and absolutely it makes sense, but there are reasons to be optimistic about why this could improve. One of the things that is, again, probably a little bit of a reach is the fact that they scored 4 power play goals over their final 3 games. So to close out the year, they were able to string together 3 games in a row where they scored on the man advantage. And there's other things to feel possibly optimistic about here, as Brian Rust is going to be working his way back into the lineup. He ended up playing, I think, right around 60 games last year, so he missed about a quarter of the season. If he has a nice year, that's probably going to be a good thing for you. Another thing as well that I wanted to touch on is Pittsburgh was in a weird spot where they had a bit of bad puck luck, as they had the 3rd highest expected goal total on the power play last season, but the 5th lowest actual goal total. So this was a situation where they should have been scoring a lot more goals, and they weren't. But I just feel in a good spot right now where, again, you're going to be seeing Bunting and, of course, Crosby and, of course, Rust on that top power play unit. Probably if things are clicking, maybe things will go well there for them. And then I think in general, they're going to be working very aggressively on trying to improve this power play and trying to have them become a better side, as it will bolster their playoff chances. Now, am I going to say they're going to be a top 10 unit? No, but they had a pretty big drop off from the 2022-2023 season compared to last last season, so maybe they could get a big rise. It's hard to imagine this team having a power play percentage that is that low, again being 15% or just a little bit over it this season again. And I think they're well aware that if they want to make the playoffs, they're going to have to score on the man advantage. It doesn't seem like it should be impossible for this group, so I'll be watching out for this, because if they are struggling again, they fail to make the playoffs, then you got to wonder again, why is the power play struggling? Why are we having so many issues? What personnel do we have to do? What changes do we have to make? I'm not opposed to tinkering with the lineup on the man advantage, especially if it slows out start. Got tongue-tied there, especially if it starts out slow, but we're going to be watching out for this, because this could be a big storyline for the Pens if they, again, get off to a rough go. And then the final storyline is going to be whether or not the Penguins can be better in overtime. So last year, of course, they had a lot of things that were going against them, as their power play wasn't working. Russ was out. Kinsel, I think, was injured at a point. He ends up getting traded. Just a lot of things that were not ideal for them. But of course, the overtime situation was great, as he only had 6 wins, I think, in 18 games that went to overtime. Kind of an issue. And a lot of this stemmed from 3-on-3, which was a problem for them. From what I could find online, they were 3-9 at one point when it came to 3-on-3. That's going to be a problem. Erik Karlsson, I remember the headlines kind of being circled around that, because he talked about it a little bit. And the way that it came out, I don't know if it intentionally came out as bad as it sounded, but it just didn't seem to gel well for them. So with all that being said, can they be better? Can they find a way to snag, possibly 12 more points or whatever it was that they left on the board last year, and just find a way to get some of those back and win these games and try to just honestly win them in regulation? The weird thing about the Penguins is they were a pretty good team when things were tied in terms of the entirety of the season, but I couldn't find normal stats for like overtime and things like that. So it's still a little bit up in the air. I don't know if they were a particularly great team when it came to things like that, but of course, being 3-9, it's not a great look. But of course, too, with it being such a small sample size, numbers kind of get thrown out the window a little bit. And then in the shootout, I think they're 2-3, something like that. So just getting better at either winning games in regulation or getting better when things get turned up a little bit, which is hard too, because again, a lot of their players are older, and we talk about that a lot too, and that is a concern. But my bigger concern is what happens if they struggle specifically at 3-on-3? What happens if you have to mess around with guys who are going to be going out there? Who is going to be getting their toes stepped on? How will that work? And how will that affect the locker room? Not necessarily fun things to think about, because I think everybody wants to win in regulation, but the reality is over the course of the season, you're going to go past 60 minutes. And if it's just awkward and tense, especially if you're not getting your way when you're going to go out there, or you want to go out there and you're playing poor hockey, and Mike Sullivan's like, no, you're not going to go out there first. That's what you just have to accept, because this is a team that is focused on getting the playoffs, not about one player trying to win hardware. So overall, what are my thoughts on the Pittsburgh Penguins? Pittsburgh is a side that I think has the real and true potential to be an improved team, but there are still a lot of things that you are wary about. Not making the playoffs 2 years in a row, being older. In some ways, it kind of remind me of the St. Louis Blues. We just covered them recently, but they're much older in a lot of categories. They have a lot of guys that are, well and truly older than what some of St. Louis's top 6 guys are, and they are just a team that did regress last year. So if they are a side that is regressing instead of improving, especially for a third straight year, they say third time's a charm. And if it's not, then you're kind of looking at this side that is older, that, again, they're saying we want to be a playoff team. And if they aren't, that's where you start to worry. But I do think the power play will improve. I really hope they can work on 3-on-3. And I just think that the Penguins should be in the mix. But I also feel like they should have been last year and they weren't. So we'll see how things play out for them. And I want to see if it is going to be a year where they can maybe surprisingly jump into top 3 in the Metro. But at the very least, I should feel like they could be in the wild card talk. If they aren't terrible, I actually feel like at this point, Mike Sullivan might not get fired. I think I said that he was on the hot seat in a season preview a little bit while ago. But I started to think about it, and I'm like, unless they had a horrendous run, he's probably not getting fired, because he's under contract for a couple more years. And they seem content kind of keeping him around. I don't really know how things will work. As long as, again, they don't get off the slow start and they are close-ish to the playoffs, I almost feel like they could ride it out with Sullivan. But who knows? Maybe they fire him, halfway through the year, even though they are about pace for making the playoffs. I don't know. At this point, I'm rambling, and I need to get ready to go to bed. But anyway, what are your thoughts on the Penguins this year? Do you think they make the playoffs? Do you think that it comes as a wildcard team, as a top 3 team? Do you think they go out there and shockingly win the Metro? That would really be something. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below on the Penguins, down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And Eagle of Hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.